Hey guys, tonight we walk into a night where the walls themselves feel like they're holding their breath. It's May 28th, 1453, just outside the ancient Theodosian walls of Constantinople, and the air smells of wet earth, torch smoke, and fear. You hear it? Drums, deep and relentless, rolling from the Ottoman camp like the heartbeat of something enormous and unstoppable. The city behind you is silent, except for the creak of leather harnesses, the soft shuffle of boots on worn stone, and the faint whisper of Latin prayers. Somewhere in the blackness beyond the ramparts, an empire's future is tightening its noose. You probably won't survive this. Before we march forward, if the fall of Constantinople is a moment you've always wanted to see through someone's eyes, stick around because we're about to step into it together. And if you're hearing this under a blanket, post your location and your local time below. I want to know who else is awake under these same stars, watching history breathe down their neck. Now, deep breath. Let's move. You're standing on the outer edge of the land walls, 3 layers of fortifications that have stared down armies for 1,000 years. But tonight they're surrounded, almost embraced, by Mehmed II's army, which has been here for nearly 2 months. The final encirclement began days ago. But now it's absolute behind you. The city's lanterns are shuttered to hide movement, but ahead the plain is lit like a carnival of war campfires stretching in an arc from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara. Thousands of small points of light, and in between them the dark hulks of siege engines, cannon carriages, and the silhouettes of soldiers moving in tight, purposeful groups. The ground under your boots is not soil anymore. It's a churned mess of mud, ash, and shattered masonry from weeks of bombardment. The Ottomans' guns have been pounding the walls every day, and the final ring they've drawn around the city is more than just physical. It's psychological. No carts come in, no pigeons leave, no river of supplies sneaks through the darkness. From the Marmara shore, Ottoman ships bob in formation, their hulls black against the water, ready to cut off any last attempt at seaward escape. To the north, beyond the Golden Horn, the massive chain boom still stretches across the harbor entrance, but Mehmed has already hauled ships overland around Galata to bypass it, a move that shocked and demoralized the defenders weeks ago. Now those vessels sit inside the horn, like a dagger pressed against the city's ribs. The army on land is a wall of men and ambition. Nearest to the Marmara stands the Anatolian contingent, hardened soldiers from Asia Minor, each unit under its provincial bays. Their banners are a forest of colors, reds, greens, crescent moons, catching the torchlight. In the center, closest to the main breaches, camp the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite corps. You can pick them out even from a distance, their white felt hats rising like strange sails above the crowd, their discipline holding them unnervingly still, even as the night swarms with movement. Farther along toward the Golden Horn, the Romelian forces, Europeans from the Balkan provinces under Ottoman control, are tightening their siege lines. Behind them, teams of sappers and miners work in the dark, trying to dig under the walls or place explosives in weakened points. It's not just soldiers. The final encirclement has drawn in a huge, chaotic ecosystem. Blacksmiths, hammering out arrowheads by firelight, cooks, stirring cauldrons of stew, camel drivers, hauling water barrels, muezzins, reciting prayers from temporary wooden platforms. And everywhere, scouts and runners carry messages between units, ducking under siege ladders laid out in neat rows for tomorrow's assault. You're close enough to see some of their preparations. Artillery crews are oiling the axles of their massive bombards, feeding powder into barrels, wrapping shot in cloth to keep it dry from the night dew. Some of these guns are monsters, stone throwers, so large it takes 60 oxen to move them, and they've been battering the same sections of wall for weeks. Their muzzles are black pits now, mouths waiting to speak in thunder. The final tightening began when Mehmed ordered his forces to close all remaining gaps in the siege cordon. Patrols now sweep the spaces between camps to ensure no one slips in or out. The noose has multiple layers, outer pickets to keep away any relief army, inner lines to keep the defenders penned in. You can feel the city shrinking under it. Inside, Constantinople knows exactly how bad it is. Scouts and defectors have brought word of the troop placements, and though the numbers shift with the terrain, the picture is grim. Estimates range from 60,000 to 80,000 Ottoman soldiers against maybe 7,000 effective defenders in the city. Those defenders have been shuffling between hotspots for weeks, patching breaches with barrels of earth, hauling rubble to reinforce crumbling towers, and replacing shattered gates with improvised barriers. But the Ottomans' pressure is relentless, and the walls now stand in some places like jagged teeth with their enamel broken away. If you were standing atop the Mesoterion, the middle wall section between the Adrianople Gate and the Blachernai, you'd see the most dangerous concentration of enemy power. Mehmed's artillery has been hammering this sector almost without pause, and it's where he's planning to send his first fiercest blows. This is the stretch where Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander, has planted himself with his best men, knowing that if this line breaks, the city will fold like a clay jar under a boot. As night deepens, the encirclement feels like a living organism. You can sense it, breathing torches flaring, voices chanting, hammers ringing. The Ottoman camp hums with the strange energy that comes before a battle that will decide centuries. Somewhere in the Sultan's own pavilion, under silken canopies, and guarded by his most trusted warriors, Mehmed is finalizing his orders. He's only 21, but already a ruler who speaks in sieges and thinks in empires. His map of the city is etched into his mind. The walls, the gates, the narrow streets that lead to Hagia Sophia, and tomorrow he intends to walk them as their master. From your vantage point, the city behind you seems to press closer to the walls, as though hoping to hide in their shadow. But the truth is, the walls no longer hide anything. Every man, woman, and child inside knows the siege is reaching its climax. The sound of the enemy is constant, no longer something out there, but in the air you breathe, in the vibration under your feet. Even the seabirds circling above the murmur seem to sense it, their cries sharper, more erratic. You glance down from the parapet at the moat below. It's half filled with rubble from collapsed wall sections, and the Ottomans have been using that debris to build ramps upward toward the base. In some places, ladders already lean against the outer wall, as if tomorrow's battle has been partially staged in advance. The final encirclement also serves a quieter purpose. It gives the attackers a kind of psychological ownership. They're not just waiting to take the city. They already live in its shadow, eat in its fields, sleep within sight of its gates. They've replaced the normal horizon with their own. The defenders, looking out, see no familiar countryside, only the enemy's world pressing inward. You catch a flicker of movement near the Ottoman lines. Small groups of men carrying bundles. These are fascines, brushwood bound together to fill moats or shore up siege works. Others carry scaling hooks, coils of rope, and large wicker shields to protect advancing soldiers from arrows and shot. Everything is being staged within easy reach of the chosen assault points. The chain of command in the encirclement is crisped. Orders ripple outward from the Sultan to his viziers, then to the beys, then to captains, and finally to individual companies. Each knows their role in tomorrow's attack, whether to storm the breaches, feint at stronger sections, or hold back as a reserve force to pour into the city once the first defenders are broken. A messenger hurries past you on the wall, heading toward the Emperor's quarters. Word must have come from one of the forward watch points, perhaps about a shift in artillery placement or an increase in enemy noise. The Byzantines are counting on these little warnings to predict the exact moment of the final push. But deep down, everyone knows, the timing belongs to Mehmed. The moon slips behind a cloud, and for a moment, the Ottoman lines fade into shadow. But you can still hear them, murmured prayers in Turkish and Arabic, the low groan of oxen straining against artillery carriages, the sharp, metallic click of weapons being checked one last time. Somewhere out there, a drummer changes rhythm, and the sound carries over the plain like an unspoken signal. You realize, standing here, that the encirclement is more than a military tactic. It's a performance. Every torch, every drumbeat, every visible piece of preparation is part of the message. We own the night, we own tomorrow. The defenders are meant to see it, to feel it, gnawing at the edges of their will. And judging by the drawn faces you pass as you walk back along the wall, the message is landing. Somewhere in the city, candles flicker in small chapels where priests and lay people pray together, asking for deliverance. Somewhere in the Ottoman camp, muezzins recite verses promising victory. And between these two worlds, a few hundred meters of torn earth and shattered stone wait quietly for dawn. From your place on the battered rampart, you shift your gaze along the jagged crown of stone toward the city's defensive spine. These walls, layer upon layer of human stubbornness, have stared down Huns, Avars, Arabs, Bulgars, and Crusaders. The Theodosian walls are not just stone, they are history mortared into place, 3 lines deep in some sectors, with an outer moat, a low outer wall, and then the massive main wall behind it. They form the city's armor, but you can see that armor is chipped and bruised from weeks of pounding. The outermost defenses lie closest to the enemy, the fosse or moat that runs like a scar along the landward side. In better days it was flooded, but now it's mostly dry, filled with rubble and timber. This was once a clean, engineered trench to slow cavalry, but siege artillery has shattered much of the retaining structure, and in places the Ottomans have used debris to create ramps. The low outer wall, or protikasma, rises beyond it, barely 2 stories, but meant to slow attackers long enough for archers to pick them off from the taller main wall behind. That main wall, the megatikos, looms 30 to 40 feet high and is thick enough at the base to hide a small room inside. It's lined with towers at regular intervals, some still bearing the imperial double-headed eagle, though the paint is cracked and the stone blackened by cannon fire. You step along the parapet of the main wall and see the defenders' efforts to keep it fighting fit. Broken crenellations have been patched with timber and barrels filled with earth. In some places, entire merlons have been replaced by doors or shutters scavenged from abandoned houses. The defenders scurry like ants, hauling stones, rolling up spare beams, checking the hoists for boiling oil or sand. Every tower that still stands is manned. The larger ones have small mangonels or ballistae inside, relics from another age, but still capable of hurling missiles at siege ladders. The city's garrison is a mosaic of desperation. The backbone is the small band of regular Byzantine soldiers under Emperor Constantine Elephant's command, veterans more valuable for their steadiness than their numbers. Alongside them fight the Genoese contingent led by Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a professional soldier whose name the Byzantines utter with a mix of gratitude and dependence. He has brought perhaps 700 well-armed men from Chios, trained in siege defense, disciplined enough to hold the most dangerous sector without flinching. Scattered among them are Venetians, Catalans, and other Western adventurers drawn by the call to defend Christendom's last stronghold in the east. Their armor glints in mismatched styles, Milanese plate beside battered mail, round shields next to tall pavises, painted with personal crests. Many carry crossbows, which deliver deadly power, but are slow to reload, forcing them to fight in teams, one shooting while another cranks. The rest of the defenders are the city's militia, craftsmen, shopkeepers, even monks pressed into service. They wield spears, axes, and bows that have seen better decades. The poorer ones have no armor beyond a thick coat, and some wear conical helmets inherited from fathers or grandfathers who fought in earlier sieges. There are a few hundred foreign sailors trapped in the city when the blockade tightened, and these men have been posted along the sea walls, where they can use their familiarity with ships and ropes to repel any naval assault. You pass one tower where a priest blesses the defenders before they resume their posts. A heavy-set archer with a carpenter's hands bows his head, then checks the string of his bow for fraying. A young man, no older than 16, tries to balance a helmet that wobbles on his head, the strap far too loose. War has made them brothers for the moment. Byzantine, Greek, Genoese, Venetian, even a handful of Turks and Serbs, who for one reason or another chose to fight against the Sultan. Inside the walls, constant repairs keep teams busy day and night. Masonry is patched with whatever can be carried to the breach. Cut stone, if it's available. Otherwise, brick rubble, even the broken statues of long-dead emperors. At night, men dangle from ropes to patch cracks with quicklime mortar by torchlight, shadows flickering across the pitted walls. Every patch buys a little more time, but every day the cannons tear away more than can be replaced. The gates are special points of concern. The Charisius Gate, near the northern end of the land wall, has been sealed with earth and timber since the siege began, its iron fittings stripped to use elsewhere. The St. Romanus Gate, closer to the center, is a focus of heavy enemy fire. It's the main road to the heart of the city, and both sides know it. The outer doors have been reinforced with massive beams and iron bands, and the inner passage is blocked by a barricade of barrels filled with gravel. Overseeing all this is Emperor Constantine XI himself, a ruler who has become as much a working foreman as a monarch. He rides the walls daily, not in parade armor, but in gear suitable for a soldier, speaking to the men by name where he can. His presence is both a comfort and a reality check. The men know he won't leave the city. His oath is clear: he will live or die with Constantinople. The chain of command under him is lean. Justiniani controls the central sector, the Mesotekion, the most heavily bombarded stretch. Venetian and Genoese captains take shifts along the sea walls, and secondary gates, the militia captains, answer directly to the emperor or his close advisors, receiving orders passed along by runners who sprint between towers and gates. There's no room for bureaucracy. Orders are often shouted from tower to tower. From the top of the walls, you can look inward over the city. It's a patchwork of red-tiled roofs, gardens, and the tall, shadowy shapes of churches. But you also see scars, streets littered with rubble from near misses, roofs covered with hastily nailed planks where shot has crashed through, and public squares now used as armories or supply depots. Wagons sit in some courtyards, piled with stones ready to be hurled down at attackers. In others, carpenters shape long beams for shoring up damaged walls. The defenders have tried to maintain morale. Bells ring for prayer at regular hours, and processions with holy relics wind through the streets, the faithful kneeling as they pass. Some men carry small icons tucked into their belts alongside daggers. On the walls, you see the occasional crude flag bearing a cross or the imperial eagle defiantly hung where the enemy can see it. Yet there is a raw edge to their courage. Many have not slept more than a few hours at a time in weeks. The constant drumming of the Ottomans carries over the walls at all hours, a heartbeat of siege that gnaws at the mind. Every thud of a cannon feels like a countdown. The men know their small numbers mean they cannot man every tower at once. They shift constantly, leaving some stretches thinly held while they mass at likely breach points. The walls themselves are telling the defender's story. You run your hand over one stretch, where the stone is warm from a recent impact, grit crumbling under your fingers. Arrow shafts jut from the timber patchwork like porcupine quills. A broken ladder from an earlier assault still leans against the outer wall below, the rungs slick with old rain. It's not all gloom. When repairs hold, when a breach is filled faster than the Ottomans can widen it, there's a murmur of pride among the defenders. Giustiniani is known for clapping a man on the shoulder after a successful repair and saying, "The wall stands because you do." For a few minutes, the city feels less like prey and more like a fighter landing a counterpunch. Still, reality presses in. The defenders have no illusions about relief. The fleets of the West are weeks away at best, if they come at all. The Ottoman encirclement is too tight for any significant reinforcements to break through. This garrison, this patched wall, this handful of gates, they're the whole hand the emperor can play. From the Blachernay Palace sector in the north to the Marmara shore in the south, every sector of the land walls has been assigned a core group and a backup. The backups are often militia, stationed just inside the wall so they can rush to any point where the line buckles. Signals are given with horns, bells, or even burning bundles swung from towers at night. In the chaos of bombardment, sometimes signals are missed, and small gaps in coordination appear like hairline cracks. Mehmed's commanders are watching for those cracks. As night deepens, you walk along the inner wall walkway, lantern light bouncing off the pitted stone. In the distance, the Sultan's camp is still ablaze with preparation, but here, the work is quieter. Measured steps, murmured words, the clink of a water flask passed between two guards. The walls creak faintly in the cooling night air, and somewhere far below, you hear the splash of a bucket in a cistern. The state of the Byzantine defenses is the state of the city itself, proud, battered, and running on borrowed time. Every stone is both a shield and a prayer. The men on these walls know that when the last breach comes, there will be no retreat deeper into the city, only the fight, and then whatever lies beyond it. And so they keep moving, keep patching, keep watching, because as long as the wall stands, Constantinople stands. If you leave the walls behind and slip down into the narrow, twisting streets, you enter the heartbeat of a city that is still alive, but breathing in shallow gasps. Life inside the besieged Constantinople is nothing like its glittering past. The broad ceremonial avenues of old are now choked with rubble from damaged houses, their marble colonnades cracked and tilted, while small market stalls, those that remain, are half empty, selling what little can be spared. Food is the constant shadow over every conversation. The blockade has sealed off the city for weeks, and while some grain reserves were stockpiled before the siege, they have been dwindling at a pace everyone feels. Rationing is strict, bread is measured in ounces, and even the emperor himself eats the same basic fare as the soldiers on the walls. Dried beans, lentils, and salted fish are the staples, but even those are stretched thin, mixed with barley husks or ground acorns to bulk out the loaves. The lucky few who keep rooftop gardens or courtyard chickens guard them jealously. A single egg has become a small luxury. In the poorer quarters near the seawalls, families gather around small cook fires, boiling thin soups that smell more of onions and herbs than of meat. Children, pale and hollow-eyed, carry buckets from public fountains, their bare feet blackened from the dust and ash in the street. The constant work of fetching water, grinding grain, and preparing rations gives people something to do, but it also underscores that survival now depends entirely on what's inside the walls. Even so, markets still open in a diminished form. Traders lay out olives, jars of honey, a handful of dried figs, some old cheese, each item priced at a level that would have been unthinkable before the siege. Coins pass hand to hand, but barter has grown common, a bolt of cloth for a sack of beans, a service in exchange for bread. Foreign sailors trapped here by the blockade sometimes sell their personal gear, daggers, boots, even spare shirts, to buy food. Religion has become both a refuge and a rallying point. Several times a week, processions wind through the streets, carrying relics from the city's churches. You hear the chime of handbells and the low chant of priests, their voices weaving together in Greek and Latin as the crowds kneel along the route. Icons are held high, draped in cloth of gold, while incense burns in silver censers, the sweet smoke mingling with the smell of cooking fires and the less pleasant scent of uncollected waste in alleyways. The faithful cross themselves, some weeping quietly, others calling out prayers for deliverance. Repair efforts inside the city are constant. Masons move from site to site with carts of stone and mortar, plugging holes in garden walls, shoring up the bases of towers, or reinforcing the supports of damaged aqueduct arches. Carpenters work on ladders, gates, and barricades. In the old armories, smiths hammer out spearheads and repair dented armor, the ring of metal echoing down streets that once hosted silk merchants and jewelers. There's a rhythm to life now, dictated by the enemy's bombardment. At dawn, people brace for the first cannon shots. By mid-morning, the streets near the walls are often littered with fresh debris, and work parties rush to clear it. Midday brings a brief lull. Time for a meager meal before the Ottomans resume their pounding. At night, some families huddle in cellars listening to the distant thud of sappers at work or to the eerie silence when the guns go still. The mood is a strange mix of fatalism and stubbornness. Many residents believe a miracle will save the city, as in earlier centuries when enemies were turned back. Stories circulate about visions of the Virgin Mary appearing on the walls, or of enemy soldiers struck blind during an attack. Others put their faith in the Emperor and Giustiniani, convinced that discipline and skill will keep the Ottomans out. But fear runs deep. You hear it in the hurried tone of voices after dark, in the way people glance toward the walls when a cannon booms. Parents warn their children to stay indoors, and some families have moved closer to the center of the city, away from the most damaged sectors. In the northern districts near the Bleshene Palace, where bombardment has been heavy, entire blocks stand half abandoned, their doors swinging open in the wind. The Hagia Sophia, still the city's largest and most awe-inspiring church, has become a center of both worship and refuge. Its vast interior is crowded with people during services, the sound of chanting rising into the great dome, mingling with the faint trickle of dust from cracks in the ancient mosaics. Some have brought mats or bedding, hoping that the sanctity of the place will shield them if the walls fall. Others come simply to stand under its soaring vaults, to remember what Constantinople once was, a jewel of the world, not a city on the brink. Small acts of kindness keep life human. A baker quietly slipping an extra roll into the bag of a widow with children. A soldier on leave from the walls giving his water ration to an old man. Neighbors pooling their supplies for a communal meal. These gestures spread quickly, and in a city where each day feels narrower than the one before, they are as nourishing as food. The defenders' families live this siege as much as the soldiers do. Wives, mothers, and daughters carry stones and water to the walls, tend the wounded in improvised infirmaries, and mend clothing and armor. The clang of needle against ring mail is as much a part of the city's soundscape now as the priest's chants. Boys too young to fight run messages between towers or watch for Ottoman movements from rooftops, their sharp eyes an early warning system. Information moves through the city in a patchwork way. Official news comes from criers or from priests speaking after services, often downplaying the seriousness of damage or casualties. Rumors, however, spread much faster. Someone says a section of the wall is about to collapse. Another insists that ships from Venice have been sighted beyond the blockade. By the time you hear these stories, they've grown in detail and urgency, passed from ear to ear like a shared heartbeat. And yet, there are still moments when life looks almost normal. On certain afternoons, you might see children playing in a square, tossing a ball, or chasing one another around the base of a statue, their laughter briefly drowning out the war. A pair of merchants might still haggle over the price of cloth, their voices rising and falling, as though the city beyond their stall weren't ringed by armies. In quieter neighborhoods, the smell of fresh bread can still drift through open windows, faint but real. When evening comes, the city darkens early. Lanterns are shuttered to keep light from marking targets for Ottoman gunners. Fires are banked low, and the streets grow still. The only sounds are the occasional patrol clattering past, the bark of a dog or the distant thump of a cannon shot echoing off the Marmara. People sleep lightly, waking at any unusual noise, especially the deep, rhythmic scrape that might mean sappers are tunneling beneath a wall. As the days wear on, the physical strain is matched by the emotional one. Hunger dulls the mind, and the constant nearness of danger frays tempers. Arguments over food or rumors can flare into shoving matches, broken up quickly by neighbors who can't afford the distraction. But there's also a shared sense of fate here. Whatever happens, all are bound together in this final stand. Byzantine and Latin, soldier and civilian, rich and poor. Every morning, when the first light hits the city's domes and towers, you can see people on rooftops looking toward the walls. Some are scanning for signs of damage. Others are simply taking in the view of their home while they still can. From that vantage, the great curve of the Golden Horn, the glittering Marmara, and the distant hills beyond are a reminder of what this city has always been, a bridge between worlds, now caught between survival and history's tide. For now, life continues in the besieged Constantinople, not in comfort, not in abundance, but in sheer willpower. Every loaf baked, every stone laid, every prayer spoken under the cracked mosaics is another way of saying the city still stands, and so do we. Beyond the walls, the Ottoman camp is a hive of precision and purpose. Mehmed II has been here since early April, but by late May, his preparations have reached a fever pitch. This is no longer a siege of attrition. This is the orchestration of a final blow. You can sense it in the way the Sultan's commanders move, brisk, clipped, every step an instruction, every gesture a part of the plan. Artillery dominates the scene. Some of the largest guns ever cast in the Islamic world stand ready along the forward siege lines. The great bombard designed by Orban, the Hungarian engineer, squats like a beast of bronze, its barrel wide enough for a man to crawl through. It has been used sparingly in the last week to keep it from cracking under strain, but even idle it exerts its own pressure on the defenders, looming, waiting. Around it are smaller but still formidable bombards, each with teams of gunners, loaders, and powdermen working in shifts to keep them supplied. The Ottoman artillery crews are meticulous. Powder is kept in sealed containers, measured by weight for consistency. Stone shot, some as heavy as half a ton, lies in neat rows under canvas to keep them dry from the spring dew. Before dawn and after sunset, crews run through dry drills, loading, aiming, sponging out barrels until they can do it in near darkness. The gunners have their targets already chosen, weakened stretches of the Theodosian walls, particularly near the St. Romanus Gate and the central Mesotiakian sector. Mining operations also continue, though they have met with mixed success. Ottoman sappers, often recruited from the Balkans or Anatolia, work in small teams under cover of night, digging tunnels toward the foundations of the walls. The idea is to plant powder charges or fires beneath the stone to collapse it from below. The Byzantines, however, have been listening, literally. In certain towers, men lie with their ears to the ground, waiting for the telltale scrape of picks underground. When they hear it, counter-miners dig toward the sound, sometimes breaking through into the enemy tunnels and fighting in the dark with torches and knives. While the artillery and sappers work, the infantry prepare for the assault. The Janissaries, the elite corps, have been training daily, in formation, scaling ladders onto earthen ramps, and practicing shield walls under missile fire. Their discipline is their weapon. They advance without breaking ranks, moving like a single living thing. Mehmed has placed them at the center of his plan. They will not be thrown into the first waves to be spent, but will be held back until the moment the defenders begin to falter. In front of them are the irregular infantry, Azaps and Bashibazouks, drawn from across the empire. They are less well armed, often carrying simple spears, swords, or bows, but their role is clear: to swarm the breaches first, exhaust the defenders, and soak up the initial counterattacks. Mehmed intends to send them in as living waves against the walls, forcing the Byzantines to expend their strength and ammunition before the Janissaries strike. Siege ladders are being checked, repaired, and stacked in orderly rows, each marked with a unit's insignia so they can be deployed without confusion. Large wicker shields, taller than a man, are being distributed to the first assault troops. These will be carried ahead to protect men as they fill the moat or plant ladders. Behind them, teams prepare bundles of fascines to throw into the moat, creating ramps for the ladders to reach the outer wall. The cavalry, while not suited for direct assault on the walls, also has a role. Mehmed has stationed them in readiness to ride down any breakout attempt by the defenders. Their horses, sleek and restless, are tethered just behind the main lines, armor glinting under the torchlight. Riders polish their saddles and check the fittings on their composite bows, ready to respond to any emergency. Mehmed's own pavilion stands at the center of the camp, marked by high poles flying the Sultan's banners, a green field with gold script, and the red flag with the white crescent. Inside, maps are spread across low tables, weighted down by daggers and cups of sherbet. The Sultan pores over them with his viziers and senior commanders, reviewing every sector of the wall, every possible breach point. His youth is deceptive. He speaks with the assurance of a man who knows both the limits of his army and the weaknesses of his enemy. His final orders are written out for each corps to be delivered to their commanders before nightfall on the eve of the assault. Spiritual preparations are as important as the material ones. In the days leading up to the final push, imams move through the camp reciting verses from the Quran, reminding the soldiers of the glory of conquest and the promise of reward in this world and the next. The mood is not reckless. There is tension, but it's shaped into focus. You can see it in the way men sharpen their blades in silence, or in how they check the stitching of their armor again and again. The Ottomans have also been using the final days to close off every possible avenue of relief to the city. Naval patrols in the Marmara keep watch for any ship daring to approach, while the galleys inside the Golden Horn remain poised to harass the sea walls or support the land assault with missile fire. The great chain across the harbor entrance is now irrelevant. Mehmed's overland transport of ships has put his fleet inside the Horn, right under the defenders' noses. On the northern flank, near Galata, the Ottoman lines are thin but sufficient. This is not where the main assault will come. The Genoese in the neutral Galata colony watch uneasily from their walls, officially non-combatants, but well aware that the outcome of this siege will change their world as much as the Byzantines. The constant bombardment has been both a practical and psychological weapon. Day after day, the guns have smashed at the same sectors, widening cracks, bringing down towers, and forcing the defenders to fight the same losing battle of repairs. At night, smaller guns fire intermittently, denying the city any real rest. The noise itself is part of Mehmed's plan. It wears at the nerves, makes every moment feel like the one before disaster. In the evenings, the Sultan sometimes rides the lines himself, accompanied by a small escort. He speaks to the men, inspects the artillery, and makes a point of being seen. The soldiers cheer when he passes, and even the seasoned janissaries straighten a little at his presence. Mehmed understands that in the final assault, morale will be as important as steel. Special attention is given to coordination. Messengers move constantly between the different corps, carrying instructions and confirming timings. Signal flags and drums have been standardized so that commands can be understood even amid the chaos of battle. A specific drumbeat will signal the start of the assault. Others will direct troops to shift toward a breach or to hold position. As the days narrow to hours, the Ottomans begin rehearsing the order of attack. The first wave will hit the weakened walls at dawn, focusing on the St. Romanus Gate and adjacent sectors. Simultaneously, diversionary assaults will be launched against the Bleternay walls and along the Marmara side to split the defenders' attention. The second wave will follow hard on the first, exploiting any breaches, while the Janissaries wait for the precise moment to drive deep into the city. Everything is in place. The shots stacked, the ladders ready, the fascines bound, the powder kegs sealed. Even the medical tents are prepared, with surgeons and orderlies ready to treat the wounded or to make them fit for another attack. Nearby, graves have been dug for those who will not return. The men see them, and no one needs to be told what they're for. This is the shape of Mehmed's preparation. Relentless, meticulous, leaving nothing to chance. The siege has been a chess match for weeks, but now every piece is positioned for the final, decisive move. The city on the hill has withstood 1,000 years of enemies, but as you look at the lines of men, the weight of cannon, the layers of planning, it's hard not to feel that the game is nearly over. If you climb one of the watchtowers on the northern land wall and turn toward the water, you can see how the sea itself has become part of the trap. The Golden Horn glitters under the pale moon, a curved inlet sheltered from the open Marmara, and once it was the lifeline of Constantinople. Now it is a theater of silent menace. Ottoman masts bristle inside the harbor like a forest of bare winter trees, their hulls rocking gently against the pilings, their crews waiting for the moment they are called to strike. The city's defenders had counted on that great iron chain stretched across the mouth of the Horn, from the Tower of Eugenius near the city's point to the Genoese quarter of Galata. Forged links, thicker than a man's wrist, sag in the water between massive anchored floats, designed to stop any enemy vessel from entering the harbor. For centuries it has worked. Arab fleets, Russian raiders, even crusaders have been checked by it, but Mehmed has already rendered it meaningless. Weeks ago, in one of the siege's most audacious moves, he had his ships hauled overland from the Bosporus, across the hill behind Galata, and slid down greased timbers into the sheltered waters of the Golden Horn, completely bypassing the chain. That night, when the Byzantines first saw Ottoman galleys where none should be, there was a sharp intake of breath across the walls. They had lost their secure flank without a fight. Now, those ships are anchored within easy range of the seawalls. They are not large. The Ottoman Navy is a mix of light galleys, 2- and 3-masted vessels, and small transports, but they're enough to harass any defenders near the water and to keep pressure on the city's small fleet. The defenders' ships, Byzantine, Genoese, and a few Venetian, are tied up at the inner quays, watching and waiting, their sails furled, their crews listening for the alarm that would mean an Ottoman landing. The naval blockade doesn't just threaten attack, it chokes the city's ability to receive supplies by sea. Before the chain was bypassed, small craft could slip in at night from friendly territories along the Black Sea coast, bringing grain or salted meat. Now, with the Ottoman fleet inside the Horn and patrols on the Marmara, those runs are nearly impossible. The few merchantmen that tried in recent weeks have been intercepted, captured, or sunk. On the Marmara side, the blockade is even tighter. Galleys patrol in overlapping circuits, their crews scanning for sails on the horizon. The Ottomans have stationed some of their fastest ships here, light, maneuverable vessels that can chase down any blockade runner. Beyond them, heavier warships linger, ready to close in if the prey tries to flee. The sea, which once brought Constantinople its wealth and security, has been turned into a prison wall of water. There have been skirmishes on the water. Early in the siege, a small fleet of Genoese supply ships from Chios, under Captain Flantanella, fought its way into the harbor, running the gauntlet of Ottoman galleys in a sharp, brutal fight. The defenders still talk about it, a moment of triumph in the midst of encirclement. But those victories are rare. Most encounters end with the Byzantines clinging to their damaged ships, limping back to the safety of the seawalls. From your vantage point on the seawall, you can see the constant tension between the two fleets. The defender ships are heavier and higher-sided, built for long voyages, but the Ottoman galleys are faster and can maneuver close to shore. Sometimes Ottoman crews row near enough to the walls to fire arrows or arquebus shots, testing the defenders' aim. In return, the city's gunners fire small cannon from embrasures in the wall, sending iron balls skipping across the water like deadly stones. The chain across the harbor is still there, sagging slightly between its supports, but now it is simply a relic, more a symbol than a barrier. Defenders still check it, still oil the fittings, and adjust the floats, but they do it with the quiet knowledge that the enemy is already inside. If the Ottomans chose to force it from the outside now, they could, though they don't need to. Mehmed's naval commanders have their own plans for the final assault. The ships in the Golden Horn are to act in concert with the land forces, pressing the defenders on the seawalls at the same time as the main assault hits the landward side. Even if they can't break through, their missile fire will tie up men and resources that might otherwise be rushed to the breaches in the land wall. The Marmara fleet has a similar role to prevent any escape by sea and to strike at the southern seawalls as a diversion. The presence of Ottoman ships so close to the city has forced changes in daily life along the waterfront. Markets that once bustled with fishmongers and traders are empty, their stalls shuttered, warehouses stand locked, their doors barred, their contents either moved inland or consumed long ago. Soldiers patrol the quays in pairs, their eyes scanning both the water and the streets behind them, ready for trouble from either direction. In the neighborhoods near the Horn, you see nets hanging unused, boats pulled up on shore and flipped hull up, their timbers drying and cracking in the sun. The fishermen have taken to mending ropes or repairing sheds instead of casting lines. They know that rowing out even a few hundred yards could invite an Ottoman arrow in the back. Children who once swam in the shallows now stand on the seawall staring at the enemy ships as if trying to memorize them. Naval skirmishes sometimes flare suddenly without warning. A few days ago, an Ottoman galley rode too close to the wall, and a lucky shot from a defender's culverin punched through its hull. Men leapt into the water, some swimming for the opposite shore, others dragged under by their own armor. The defenders cheered, but the Ottomans responded the next morning by bombarding the same stretch of wall from 3 directions: land, sea, and from the ships in the Horn. The message was clear: no small victory would go unanswered. The defender's own fleet is too precious to risk an open battle unless absolutely necessary. Every hull that survives is a potential escape route if the worst happens, or a last means of striking at the Ottomans if the walls are breached. Sailors spend their days making small repairs, checking rigging, and keeping the hulls tarred and watertight. The smell of pitch hangs in the air near the quays, mingling with the salty tang of the water and the faint reek of waste from the shoreline. From the tower above the chain's anchoring point, you can watch the Ottoman crews at work. Their galleys are lean and purposeful, with banks of oars that rise and fall in perfect unison. You see men polishing shields, stacking bundles of arrows, and passing buckets of water along the deck to fill the clay jars they'll use to douse fires in battle. Drummers sometimes beat time for the rowers just to keep them sharp, the steady boom carrying faintly across the water. The naval blockade has also cut off messages to and from the city. Once, swift boats could carry word to Allied ports in a matter of days. Now, any messenger who leaves by water risks capture, and any that tries to sneak along the shore is likely to be spotted from the decks of patrolling galleys. Inside the city, people still talk about sending pleas for help to Venice, Genoa, or the Papal States, but they know those letters may never leave the harbor. At night, the sea becomes an expanse of black glass, broken by the lanterns of the anchored ships. The Ottomans keep their lights low, but they are visible enough to remind the defenders that escape is impossible. The faint clink of rigging, the creak of oarlocks, the occasional shout in Turkish or Greek drifts across the water. From the city's side, the seawall guards peer into the darkness, crossbows or bows at the ready, listening as much as watching. This blockade is more than a physical barrier. It is a slow tightening of the siege's grip. With no fresh supplies coming in, the city's stores dwindle. With no way out, the morale of both defenders and civilians is penned in. As surely as the ships in the harbor, Mehmed doesn't need to sink the Byzantine fleet to win. He just needs to make it useless. And looking out over the still, moonlit waters of the Golden Horn, you can see he has already done exactly that. The closer you get to the city's churches, the stronger the smell of incense becomes. It drifts out through half-open doors and high windows, mingling with the sharper tang of candle wax and the faint mildew of ancient stone. In the final days before the expected assault, Constantinople has turned inward to faith, not as a quiet, private matter, but as a city-wide act of defiance and supplication. Every major church is busy from dawn until, well past midnight, the clergy move through the streets in processions, carrying relics wrapped in embroidered cloths, their gilt cases glinting in the torchlight. At the head of one such line, a deacon swings a silver censer, trailing thick coils of smoke, while a choir chants in Greek and Latin. The voices echo off the walls of narrow lanes, their sound swelling as the crowd joins in. Shopkeepers, soldiers, and children kneel as the procession passes, crossing themselves quickly before returning to their tasks. In the Hagia Sophia, the great space under the dome is alive with both fear and hope. Priests stand at the high altar, offering prayers for deliverance, while the nave fills with people of every rank. Some clutch small icons to their chests, others simply stand with heads bowed, lips moving silently. The gold mosaics overhead catch the light from hundreds of candles, flickering as though the saints themselves are leaning forward to listen. The chants here are low and continuous, a steady hum that seems to anchor the faithful against the chaos beyond the walls. Smaller churches, too, are packed. In the quarter near the Blackernay Palace, residents gather at the Church of the Virgin, a site long believed to offer protection to the city. Here, the icon of the Theotokos is paraded around the building 3 times a day. The congregation following barefoot, some with tears streaking their faces. Mothers lift their children up to touch the icon's frame, hoping to pass on a blessing. Stories of omens circulate with a life of their own. A few nights ago, someone claimed to see a strange light over the dome of Hagia Sophia, a glow that hovered for a moment before fading into the darkness. Some say it was a sign that divine help is coming. Others whisper that it marked the departure of the Holy Spirit, abandoning the city. Another rumor tells of a star falling over the Ottoman camp, interpreted by some as a warning to Mehmed. Even the skeptics can't quite ignore these tales. In times like this, signs are as real as stones. The Ottomans have their own rituals. From the walls, you can hear the muezzins calling the faithful to prayer in the enemy camp, their voices carrying over the drum beats before dawn. And at sunset, thousands of soldiers kneel in neat rows, pressing their foreheads to the ground. In these moments, the siege feels like a contest of faith as much as arms, two worlds facing each other across a narrow strip of torn earth. Inside the city, religious unity is more complicated. The Latin and Greek clergy have long been divided, and the union proclaimed at the Council of Florence, meant to reconcile the churches, remains controversial. Some of the Orthodox faithful resent the Latin priests in their midst, even as they stand shoulder to shoulder in the same processions. Yet, in the face of the siege, the divisions soften. The prayers rise together now, not in theological agreement, but in the shared knowledge that survival depends on standing as one. Relics are brought out that haven't been seen in years. Fragments of the true cross, bones of saints and cloths, said to have touched the apostles, are carried along the walls, held high for defenders to see and venerate. Soldiers reach out to touch them as they pass, then return to their posts with a little more determination in their step. Even the foreigners, Genoese, Venetians, Catalans, bow their heads when the reliquaries go by. The mood during these processions is both solemn and electric. Bells toll as the lines of clergy and laity wind through the streets, past damaged houses and over piles of rubble, past wells where women draw water and smithies where hammers still ring. Every so often, the sound of an Ottoman cannon interrupts, a deep boom that rattles the windows. The procession pauses, murmurs rise, and then the chanting resumes as if to push the sound back over the walls. The emperor himself attends services daily, standing in the open among his people. He is often seen at Hagia Sophia bareheaded, dressed plainly in armor rather than ceremonial robes. His presence is not grand, but it is steady, and it reassures the crowd. When the patriarch blesses him, the blessing is for all who fight. Even the routine of the garrison is shaped by these religious moments. Before dawn, a short service is held on the walls, priests moving from tower to sprinkle holy water on the defenders. In some sectors, a small icon is placed where the enemy is expected to attack, as if to hold the line in spirit before the men do it in flesh. On the eve of battle, these parallel rituals intensify. The Byzantines hold an all-night vigil in Hagia Sophia, the building filled to the edges with men, women, and children. Candles cover every flat surface, their flames flickering in the drafts, casting the mosaics into shifting gold and shadow. Priests move through the crowd with censers, blessing each person in turn. People confess to one another, seek forgiveness, and embrace as though it might be the last time. Outside, the Ottomans gather in their own masses. Fires burn high in the camp, casting the banners into stark relief. Drums pound, but there are also moments of quiet as prayers are spoken. Men sharpen swords, oil armor, and then kneel together, foreheads in the dust. The two worlds, Christian and Muslim, are locked in their final preparations, each convinced that heaven is on its side. The effect of all this is a city and a siege camp, both brimming with an almost tangible charge. It's in the air, in the posture of the soldiers on the walls, in the murmur of the crowd as they part for a relic. It's in the way both sides glance upward, one to the stars, one to the minarets, looking for some sign that tomorrow will belong to them. The night before the assault, the bells of the city and the calls from the camp seem to answer each other, echoing across the narrow space between. It is as if the last dialogue before the storm is not in words, but in faith spoken in two languages to the same silent sky. The night before the final assault begins, without ceremony, but the weight of it settles over every street, tower, and tent. Inside the walls, the air is still, as if the city is holding its breath. Outside, in the Ottoman camp, the movements are careful, deliberate, soldiers shifting into their assigned positions under cover of darkness, orders whispered rather than shouted. It is the last night Constantinople will spend as a Byzantine city, though no one says the words aloud. On the land walls, the watch is doubled, lanterns are hooded to keep the enemy from spotting their glow, and sentries stand at every crenelle, eyes scanning the strip of no man's land for unusual activity. The rubble-strewn ground between the lines looks almost peaceful in the moonlight, but here and there you can make out shapes. Ottoman workers moving fascines, dragging siege ladders, rolling barrels that you know will be powder or stones for the assault. The defenders watch, powerless to stop them without wasting precious ammunition before the attack truly begins. Emperor Constantine XI rides the length of the wall one last time, accompanied by a small escort. His armor is plain, dented in places, the plumes of his helmet clipped short. He stops at each major gate to speak briefly with the commanders there, offering quiet words, a clasp on the shoulder, or simply a nod. At the Messation, he spends the longest time with Giustiniani, the Genoese captain, who has guarded the most battered sector of the wall since the siege began. The two men speak low, leaning toward each other, their expressions grim but steady. No one hears their words, but when they part, Giustiniani salutes with his sword, and Constantine answers in kind. In the streets below, the people make their own preparations. Some remain in the churches, continuing the vigils that have lasted for days. Others return to their homes, bolting doors, dousing lamps, and gathering their families in the most secure rooms they can find. Mothers soothe children with whispered promises that the saints will protect them. Fathers check swords or axes they haven't used in years, the blades hastily sharpened against a whetstone. The smell of wax, oil, and nervous sweat hangs in the air. The Hagia Sophia is crowded. Well past midnight, candles burn in every corner, their flames mirrored in the gold tesserae of the dome. The patriarch leads prayers for the city, his voice steady despite the tremor that runs through the crowd when distant drums start to roll from the Ottoman camp. Worshippers press closer to the altar, as if proximity to it might make a difference when dawn comes. Some take communion, kneeling on the worn marble. Others simply stand with heads bowed, eyes closed, mouthing the same phrases over and over. Outside the walls, Mehmed's army moves like a great machine. Units assemble at their designated points. The Zaps and irregulars in the foremost ranks, Janissaries farther back in disciplined columns. Officers walk along the lines, murmuring instructions and checking weapons. The siege artillery, which has been pounding the city for weeks, falls silent for the moment, partly to conserve powder, partly to let the men rest their ears before the chaos to come. In the quiet, you can hear the creak of leather straps, the faint jingle of armor, and the scuff of boots in the dirt. Mehmed himself remains in his pavilion until late in the night, reviewing the plan with his viziers and commanders. When he emerges, he rides slowly along the front lines, accompanied by torchbearers and a small guard. The men cheer softly, some raising their weapons in salute. The Sultan pauses at key positions to speak to the corps leaders, repeating the timings, the signals, and the order of attack. His confidence is unshaken, his tone is firm without the bluster of a man trying to convince himself. Between the two armies lies that narrow, wrecked strip of earth, churned by weeks of bombardment and filled with broken ladders, shattered timbers, and the bodies of men who fell in earlier assaults. Even now, the air there has a faint, metallic tang from dried blood. In some places, fascines have been laid in the moat, making crude ramps up to the outer wall. Elsewhere, siege towers stand ready to be rolled forward at the first light. As midnight passes, the Ottomans' preparations grow more intense. Powder charges are carried toward the forward artillery. Stacks of stone shot are placed where gunners can reach them without delay. Ladders are leaned against embankments, ready to be lifted and carried by teams of men when the signal comes. In the darkness, engineers make final adjustments to the gun carriages, checking the aim against the outlines of towers barely visible against the sky. Inside the city, the defenders hear the muffled activity and know what it means. Messengers move along the walls, reminding each sector of its orders. Hold until relieved. Keep reserves ready to rush to breaches. Signal for help if the wall is compromised. Buckets of water and sand are placed near every gate and tower to douse fires. Piles of stones are stacked behind the parapets to be hurled down on attackers. Archers and crossbowmen sleep in their armor, bows strung, quivers full. There's little conversation now. Even the most talkative soldiers keep their thoughts to themselves. You can feel the weight of what's coming pressing down on everyone. Some stare out at the enemy lines as if trying to memorize them. Others keep their eyes on the city behind them, perhaps wondering if this is the last night they will see it whole. Shortly before dawn, the final religious rites are performed. On the Byzantine side, priests walk the length of the walls, blessing each man and sprinkling holy water over the parapets. In the Ottoman camp, imams lead mass prayers, the voices of thousands rising together in unison. The two choruses, so different in language and creed, drift toward each other on the still air, meeting and mingling above the ground, where so many will die within hours. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the smell of campfires and the faint acrid bite of gunpowder. From the Marmara shore to the Bolshoi sector in the north, the lines are set. The night's last hour seems to stretch unnaturally long, as if time itself is reluctant to move forward. Men shift their weight from foot to foot, flex fingers on sword hilts, or check bowstrings for the 10th time. In the city, some families cling to each other in darkened rooms. Others have moved into the churches, hoping that sanctity will provide safety. The streets are empty, except for the occasional runner carrying orders, or the distant clatter of a patrol, changing shifts on the wall. The air is cool, damp with the promise of morning dew. In the Ottoman camp, the drums start softly, a slow, steady beat that spreads from core to core. It is not yet the signal for the assault, but it is enough to make the defenders straighten and grip their weapons tighter. Along the lines, officers pass the word, "Be ready." For a brief moment, as the first pale light touches the horizon, both sides stand in a kind of suspended silence. The defenders look out over the wrecked ground, seeing the enemy ranks solid and waiting. The attackers face the walls, knowing the work of the siege is almost done. Between them lies the last calm they will ever share. The first light of May 29th spills over the eastern horizon in a faint silver wash, and with it comes the sound. It starts as a low, distant boom, one gun, then another, then a dozen, until the air itself is shuddering. The Ottoman artillery has opened its last greatest barrage. You can feel each shot in your ribs as much as you hear the heavy crash of stone balls slamming into the Theodosian walls. Dust bursts upward from the parapets, cascading down over the defenders crouched behind them. The guns fire in relentless sequence. The smaller bombards keep up a rapid rhythm, their reports snapping like whips, while the massive Orban cannon speaks in slower, deeper roars, each one followed by a pause as its crew sponges, loads, and rams another gigantic stone into its bronze throat. When it fires, ground trembles under your feet and a ripple of shouts goes up from the attackers, as if they can will the walls to fall by cheering loudly enough. Along the Mesotiagion, the damage from weeks of bombardment shows in stark relief. Towers are jagged at the top, some leaning outward at dangerous angles. Whole sections of the outer wall have collapsed into the moat, creating ramps of rubble up which an assault could run. Even the great inner wall bears fresh cracks, white lines spidering outward from impact points, where the stone is powdered under the force of repeated hits. The defenders answer with their own smaller guns, but the difference in scale is cruel. Byzantine culverins and bombardini send iron shot down into the packed ranks of Ottoman infantry waiting behind the artillery line, but they can't match the sheer destructive weight of Mehmed's guns. Still, every shot that finds a target buys a few moments breathing room, a few fewer men who will be in the first wave over the rubble. By mid-morning, the bombardment reaches a fever pitch. The Sultan's gunners have orders to concentrate on specific points. The St. Romanus Gate and the nearby breaches are hammered without pause. The air there becomes a choking haze of dust and smoke. Defenders cough into the cloths tied over their mouths, blinking through stinging eyes as they try to aim at the shadows moving below. Orders are shouted, but often lost in the thunder of the guns. Then the signal comes. A rolling wave of drumbeats rises from the Ottoman lines, faster and louder than before, accompanied by the blare of trumpets. From behind the artillery, the first wave of attackers surges forward. The Azaps, irregular infantry armed with spears, swords, and bows. They come at a run, shouting war cries, some firing arrows upward, others carrying bundles of brush to throw into the moat. The defenders loose their first volleys. Arrows and bolts hiss down, followed by stones and jars of Greek fire hurled from the parapets. Some of the leading attackers crumple instantly, others press on, leaping over the bodies of their comrades. In places where the outer wall is gone, they clamber up the rubble toward the main wall, raising their shields against the missiles raining down. Scaling ladders appear, borne on the shoulders of teams of men. They slam them against the wall's base, and the first climbers begin their ascent. Many don't make it more than a few rungs before they're knocked backward by stones or pikes thrust down from above. The ladders themselves are shoved away or overturned, sending whole clusters of men tumbling into the moat. At the St. Romanus sector, Giustiniani's Januzzi fight like a wall within the wall. Crossbowmen fire in tight sequence, one kneeling to shoot while another reloads behind him. Men with long pikes lean out over the parapet to jab at anyone trying to climb, while others pour water on the flaming arrows that pepper the wooden bracing of their repairs. The noise is deafening, shouts in Greek, Italian, and Turkish, the drumbeat of boots on stone, the constant percussion of gunfire from both sides. The first wave is meant to exhaust the defenders, and it does. For nearly an hour, the Azaps throw themselves at the walls, filling the moat with their dead, testing every breach and ladder point. By the time they're finally pulled back, the defenders are sweating and breathing hard, their quivers lighter, their arms aching from swinging weapons and hurling stones. There is no pause. Almost immediately, the second wave moves up, better armed troops from the provincial contingents. These men are equipped with heavier shields, helmets, and axes for hacking at the timber reinforcements on the breaches. They advance more cautiously, using the bodies and rubble in the moat as cover, pushing scaling ladders higher and trying to anchor them in place. In some sectors, they bring up large mantlets, wield wooden shields to shelter small teams working at the wall's base. The St. Romanus Gate shudders under repeated blows from a massive battering ram. Its head is sheathed in iron, shaped like a snarling beast, and each swing makes the timbers groan. Inside the gate passage, defenders have stacked barrels and stones against the doors, praying that the hinges hold. Every time the ram strikes, dust sifts down from the arch overhead. On the parapets, the defenders are forced to split their attention. While some keep the climbers back, others turn to meet small breaches where attackers have managed to scramble up. At one point, a group of provincial troops gains a foothold on a partially collapsed tower. The fight there turns to brutal close combat, sword against sword, axe against shield, until the defenders shove the last man back and send him falling into the heap below. From the walls, you can see Mehmed's command position. The Sultan stands surrounded by his guard, watching the progress of the assault through the smoke. Messengers dash to and from his side, carrying orders to reinforce one sector, shift artillery fire to another. When a latter point shows promise, a fresh company is sent in to exploit it. When one collapses under the defender's counterattack, another is moved into place. The defenders try their own signals, horns, and flag waves to call reserves to the hardest hit sectors. Men rush along the wall walks, ducking behind crenellations as arrows whip past. In the city below, more militia are mustered, handed whatever weapons can be found, and sent toward the fighting. The streets near the wall echo with the tramp of boots and the distant clash of steel. By late morning, the battle has turned into a grinding test of will. The breaches gape wider under constant bombardment, and the rubble leading up to them is slick with blood. Defenders fight with whatever they can lift. Swords, spears, broken masonry, even tools from the repair works. Attackers die in the moat, on the ladders, in the narrow gaps where they try to force their way in, but more always come forward to replace them. The heat of the day begins to rise, mingling with the stench of powder smoke and the sharper smell of sweat and iron. Voices grow hoarse from shouting, hands blister under weapon hilts, bowstrings fray, armor grows heavier with every passing minute. The defenders know this is only the prelude. Mehmed has yet to commit his Janissaries, and when he does, the real trial will begin. Still, they hold at the Mesoteian. Justiniani rallies his men for another push, pointing with his sword toward a ladder that has just gone up. A dozen Genasi charge, hack at the rungs until it falls, then turn to meet the next attempt. Farther south, near the Marmora, a group of militia manages to set fire to a mantelet, forcing the attackers behind it to scatter. The artillery never stops, even as infantry clash at the wall's base. The great guns keep pounding, sending fresh cracks into already weakened stone. In one sector, a whole chunk of parapet collapses under the defenders' feet, sending 2 men tumbling into the moat. Their comrades fill the gap with barrels of earth, working under arrow fire, because to leave it open would be an invitation. As the sun climbs higher, the drums change rhythm again. This is the signal the defenders have been dreading, the call for the Janissaries to advance. They emerge from the rear ranks in perfect order, their tall white headgear bright against the haze. They move without hurry, without wasted motion, stepping over the fallen of the first 2 waves as if they were part of the ground. Behind them, the Sultan watches, knowing this is the moment the siege turns from pressure to decision. The Janissaries advance in an unbroken line, their shields overlapping, their spears and arquebuses ready. You can hear them before you see them clearly, boots striking the rubble in measured rhythm, a steady chant rising from their throats to match the beat of the great kettle drums behind them. In contrast to the chaotic rushes of the earlier waves, this feels deliberate, inevitable, like a tide rolling in. On the walls, the defenders tighten their grips, and many are exhausted from the morning's constant fighting, arms heavy, throats raw from shouting. Sweat streaks through the dust on their faces, and more than a few have blood, either their own or someone else's, drying on their armor. Still, when they see the Janissaries moving into range, they raise their bows, crossbows, and guns. They know what's coming. The most disciplined, relentless force in Mehmed's army. The artillery slackens slightly, just enough for the Janissaries to push forward without being crushed by their own side's fire. In that lull, you can hear the defenders' shouted commands, the thwack of bowstrings, and the deep crack of culverins. Bolts and bullets slam into the front ranks, dropping some of the enemy, but the gaps close instantly. At the Mesoteian, the battered heart of the defense, the rebel ramps leading to the main breach are already black with blood. The Janissaries step onto them without hesitation, shields high, taking the hail of arrows and stones without breaking formation. A few crouch behind large pavises planted in the rubble, giving covering fire for the men advancing behind them. The first of these reached the top of the breach, meeting the Janissaries and Byzantines in a brutal clash of steel and wood. The fighting here is nothing like the long-range exchanges earlier. It's close enough that you can smell the other man's breath, close enough that a stumble means death. Swords slide along shields, pikes thrust and are deflected, axes rise and fall. The defenders use every advantage of height, leaning down to strike at exposed faces, jabbing between shield edges. The Janissaries answer with upward thrusts, trying to hook defenders off balance. or with sudden shield bashes that drive a man back a step, sometimes all that's needed for another attacker to slip past. In some places, the defenders have built low barricades behind the breach, forcing the attackers to clamber over while being cut at from both sides. These obstacles slow the janissaries, but do not stop them. Inch by inch, they press forward, forcing the defenders to give ground or risk being surrounded. To the north, near the Blachernay sector, another group of janissaries scales ladders that have somehow stayed in place under arrow fire. They climb quickly, shield on one arm, short sword or hand axe in the other. At the top, they meet a wall of pikes. For a moment, the ladder tops bristle with weapons, the fighters too close to swing freely, pushing and stabbing in a desperate knot. Then the ladder tips backward, crashing into the moat with its load of men. Others take their place immediately, setting the base against the wall and beginning the climb again. Inside the city, reserves are rushing toward the breaches. Messengers sprint through the streets, shouting for reinforcements at St. Romanus, at the north wall, at any sector where the janissaries have gained a foothold. Men who were guarding quieter stretches abandon their posts, carrying spears, maces, even carpenters' tools turned into weapons. Women follow with buckets of water for the wounded, or with bags of stones to be hurled down from the walls. The sound of the fighting becomes a kind of constant roar, drums, shouts, the crash of weapons, and the dull, heavy impacts of cannon against stone. Smoke from gunpowder and burning timbers drifts in and out, sometimes obscuring the fight entirely. Through it, you catch glimpses, a janissary officer shouting orders, his white headdress spattered with mud, Giustiani lunging forward to cut down a climber before he can crest the breach, a young militiaman staggering backward with an arrow through his thigh, hauled out of the line by his comrades. The defenders counterattack whenever they can. At one breach, a group of Genoese pushes forward in a sudden rush, driving the janissaries back several yards before the line reforms. At another, boiling water is poured down from the parapets, scalding the men below and forcing them to drop their ladders. But these victories are temporary. The janissaries regroup, advance again, and the cycle repeats. The sheer discipline of the enemy begins to tell. Unlike the earlier waves, they don't scatter when a breach is temporarily closed. They simply shift to another point of attack. When a ladder is broken, a new one is brought forward. When a man falls, another steps into his place without breaking formation. They are not faster or stronger than the defenders, but they are inexhaustible in a way that makes each minute feel heavier than the last. The St. Romanus gate takes the worst of it. The battering ram has weakened the doors, and every few minutes there's a fresh splintering crack. Behind the doors, men brace heavy beams against them, knowing they can't hold forever. Above, the wall is slick with blood, the stones littered with broken weapons and shattered arrows. Giustiani himself is everywhere in this sector, shouting orders, plugging gaps, even stepping into the melee to drive back a climber with his sword. His presence keeps the line from breaking, but the strain shows in the way he leans on his shield between surges. By midday, the fighting has moved inside parts of the outer wall. In some sectors, the janissaries have taken control of the space between the outer and inner walls, forcing the defenders to hold the higher line alone. Here, archers and crossbowmen fire down into the killing zone, but the attackers are protected by the walls themselves, making it harder to dislodge them. Street-by-street combat begins on the very edge of the city. In the northwest, near the Blachernay Palace, a group of janissaries manages to force a postern gate and pour into the first line of houses. The defenders there are mostly militia, armed with spears and axes. They fight from doorways and windows, stabbing down from balconies, hurling tiles from rooftops. The narrow streets turn into death traps, littered with bodies and debris. In these close quarters, the sound changes, less the open roar of the breaches, more the sharp clash of blades, the grunt of effort, the scream of the wounded. Smoke from burning timbers curls up between buildings, mixing with the sour smell of blood and sweat. Civilians flee down side streets, clutching children or bundles of belongings, trying to reach the relative safety of the central districts. Back at the main breach, the defenders are being pushed to their limit. Ammunition is running low. Men are fighting with half-empty quivers, sometimes holding back a shot until they see the whites of the enemy's eyes. Swords nick and chip against the iron rims of janissary shields. The walls are slick underfoot, and more than one man slips, falling into the crush below. Still, the defenders refuse to give way entirely. Every yard lost is fought for twice with counterattacks, barricades, and the sheer weight of bodies in the line. The janissaries know they are close, but the city has not yet fallen. Mehmed, watching from his command post, sends more reserves towards St. Romanus, determined to keep the pressure constant. The day is not over, and neither side is ready to concede. It happens not at the St. Romanus gate, where the fighting is thickest, nor at the Mesotatian breach that's been hammered all morning, but at a quieter point, farther north, one of those stretches of wall that had been considered relatively secure. The Kirkoporta, a small postern gate near the Blachernae Palace, is not even widely known among the city's defenders. It's little more than a narrow opening between the outer and inner walls, normally kept barred, and in the confusion of the day's fighting it has been overlooked. The exact chain of events is impossible to trace. In the moment, some later say, a group of defenders used the Kirkoporta in the early hours to make a sortie, then failed to close it behind them. Others believe an Ottoman force found the gate damaged by earlier bombardment and quietly worked it open under cover of the noise elsewhere. Whatever the cause, the fact is that, by mid-morning, a small contingent of Ottoman troops, likely from the Rumelian Corps, finds the Kirkoporta unguarded and open. They slip through quickly, no more than a few dozen at first, but the gap is inside the city's outer defenses. These men scale the short flight of steps to the inner wall and begin attacking from the rear. The defenders here, startled and few in number, are suddenly faced with enemies both in front and behind. The shock of it ripples outward, men calling for help, messengers sprinting toward nearby towers, horns blowing in confusion. From the Ottoman side, the breach at Kirkoporta is like water finding the lowest point. More troops pour in, widening the opening, forcing back the defenders who try to seal it. The space inside the wall is narrow, but once the attackers are established there, they can spread laterally, striking into adjacent towers and wall walks. Within minutes, the situation at Blachernae shifts drastically. The defenders, already stretched thin, have to peel men from other sectors to deal with the intrusion. That means fewer reinforcements for St. Romanus and the Mesotatian, exactly where the Janissaries are pressing hardest. The Ottomans sense the change in rhythm. The drums from Mehmed's command post quicken, signaling the push to intensify everywhere. From above, you can see the geometry of disaster forming. The Kirkoporta opening gives the Ottomans a point of leverage inside the city's defensive loop. They can now strike both inward toward the residential streets and outward along the wall, cutting off segments of the defense from each other. It also gives them a path to attack the inner gates from behind. The fight at the Kirkoporta is fierce, but the imbalance of numbers grows quickly. The Byzantines throw militia into the gap, men with little armor, clutching spears or short swords, but they're met by fresh, disciplined troops who have not spent the morning under bombardment. The clash echoes strangely in the narrow space, the sound boxed in by high walls, every shout and clash of steel magnified. Nearby residents, hearing the battle so close, begin to flee. Women carrying bundles of possessions hurry away from the Blachernae quarter, dragging children behind them. Some run toward Hagia Sophia, others toward the southern districts, hoping the fighting will not follow. But the streets here twist and narrow, and already there are reports of Ottoman troops appearing at unexpected corners. On the wall walks south of Kirkoporta, defenders are suddenly attacked from the flank. Men who had been firing down at the Janissaries find themselves turning to meet sword blows from their own level. The confusion is total. Some defenders think the Ottomans have scaled the wall directly. Others realize too late that the enemy came in through a door they assumed was barred. The ripple effect reaches the St. Romanus sector by late morning. Giustiniani receives word that the enemy may be inside the walls to the north. He cannot spare many men, but he sends a small detachment to investigate, knowing that if the report is true, the entire defensive plan could collapse. This leaves his own sector thinner at precisely the wrong time. Mehmed's commanders do not waste the opportunity. As the defenders' focus shifts, they order renewed assaults along the main breaches, pushing the Janissaries forward with fresh provincial troops in support. The noise rises, more drums, more shouting, the crack of muskets fired almost point blank at the parapets. At the Kirkoporta, the Ottomans now control both the gate and a short stretch of wall on either side. They begin lowering ropes for more men to climb up from the outside, bypassing the moat entirely. From these new vantage points, archers and gunners fire into the backs of defenders, still holding other wall sectors. It is a reversal of the usual siege dynamic. The attackers are now above the defenders. Inside the city, word spreads unevenly. Some sectors fight on without knowing the breach has been compromised. Others hear only fragments. The Turks are in, without knowing where or in what numbers. Panic begins to flicker in the civilian population. Doors are barred, shutters slammed. Those who can, flee deeper into the city. Those who cannot, take up whatever weapon is at hand, and prepare for the worst. The defenders at Kirkoporta make one last concentrated attempt to retake the gate. Led by a group of veterans from the palace guard, they charge into the narrow space, forcing the Ottomans back toward the outer opening. For a moment, it looks as if they might succeed. Steel rings on steel. Men fall on both sides, the press of bodies so tight that movement is reduced to short, hacking blows. But then, fresh Ottoman reinforcements arrive from the camp outside, pouring through the gate in a solid wedge. And the counterattack falters. The defenders are pushed back, their line breaking apart into smaller knots of resistance. By midday, the Kirkoporta is firmly in Ottoman hands, and the way into the Blachernay quarter is open. The Sultan's banners are planted on the captured towers, fluttering in the smoky air. From these high points, the attackers can see the domes and spires of the city spread out before them, the Golden Horn glinting beyond. It is the first time in the siege that they have looked down into Constantinople from inside its defenses. The effect on morale is immediate. For the Ottomans, it's a surge of confidence, proof that the walls, though massive and storied, can be breached. For the Byzantines, it's a shudder of dread. Even those still fighting hard at the main breaches feel the weight of the news, whether they hear it from a breathless messenger or catch sight of an unfamiliar banner on a distant tower. At St. Romanus, the pressure mounts. Giustiniani is now fighting a two-front defense, holding the main breach against the Janissaries, while keeping an eye on the threat from the north. His men are showing signs of fatigue, and ammunition is running dangerously low. Every arrow, every bolt is now measured before release. Stones are prized weapons, easier to come by, but no less deadly when dropped from height. The Kirkoporta breach changes the battle's geometry in another way. It allows the Ottomans to bring more artillery closer to the walls from within the outer perimeter. Smaller field guns are hauled through the gate and set up to fire along the interior of the defenses, a devastating tactic that pins down any attempt at regrouping. From Mehmed's command post, the Sultan sees the banners go up at Kirkoporta and orders the full exploitation of the breach. More troops are sent in, including cavalry on foot, who can move quickly through the captured streets. Their orders are clear: spread out, seize intersections, and link up with the forces pressing in from the main breaches. The aim is to turn isolated fights into a rolling collapse of the entire defensive line. For the defenders, the day's grim calculus has shifted. Until now, holding the walls meant holding the city. With the Kirkoporta open, the fight is no longer linear. It's about stopping the enemy from splitting the defenders and cutting them off from one another. And with every passing minute, that task becomes harder. The word reaches the emperor while he is still near the St. Romanus gate, sword in hand, rallying his soldiers. The Kirkoporta has fallen. The enemy is inside. A lesser commander might retreat to a more defensible position, but Constantine XI knows that abandoning the walls now will only hasten the collapse. Instead, he rides forward into the thickest fighting, choosing to stand where the danger is greatest. He is dressed not in imperial robes, but in armor, plain and functional, its plates dented from earlier engagements. A scarlet surcoat over the breastplate is his only concession to rank, the color marking him to friend and foe alike. His presence among the men is not ceremonial. He fights. You see him on the wall walk, shouting orders to archers, pointing out targets, waving reserves forward. His voice carries over the din, calm but urgent, a fixed point in the chaos. The St. Romanus sector is a storm. The Janissaries are relentless, their shields locking as they drive up the breach. Their arquebusiers firing in disciplined volleys from just below the parapets. Behind them, more troops press forward, filling every gap. Defenders have been pushed back to the very edge of the inner wall in places, and the air is thick with dust from fresh impacts of Ottoman artillery. Constantine fights alongside his guards, and the Genoese under Giustiniani. They form a tight knot near the main breach, cutting down any who gain a foothold. A Janissary officer lunges at the emperor. Constantine parries and riposts, his blade biting into the man's shoulder before another defender shoves the attacker back into the crowd below. Giustiniani is everywhere too, directing the Genoese with clipped gestures, moving men where the pressure is worst. But disaster strikes when he is hit. Accounts differ whether it's an arrow, a bullet, or a piece of flying stone. He staggers, clutching his side, and his men rush to pull him away from the breach. Constantine tries to keep him there, urging him to hold a little longer, but Giustiniani is bleeding heavily. The Genoese captain insists on being taken back into the city to have the wound dressed. His removal is a blow far greater than the loss of one man. The Genoese see their commander being carried off and assume the sector is lost. Some begin to fall back toward the inner gates, taking their crossbows and pikes with them. The line at St. Romanius wavers for the first time all morning. Constantine senses it instantly, riding into the gap, urging the remaining defenders to stand fast. He shouts over the din. The city still stands. Hold the wall. The fight narrows to brutal, hand-to-hand exchanges at the breach. The emperor's sword is streaked with blood, his shield is dented and splintered. His guards form a ring around him, striking down any who come too close, but he is not content to be protected. He lunges forward when an attacker is within reach, driving them back with the sheer force of his blows. All along the wall, similar scenes play out. At Kirkoporta, the Ottomans widen their hold, pushing into the Blakrene quarter. In the streets there, defenders form makeshift barricades from carts and furniture, fighting from behind them as the enemy advances. Near the Golden Horn, defenders on the seawall see Ottoman banners fluttering closer from the land side and realize they may soon be attacked from behind. Back at St. Romanus, Constantine's last stand is taking shape. He moves from point to point, rallying men, plugging holes in the line, sometimes physically shoving soldiers back into position. Every time an Ottoman banner appears at the top of the breach, he leads the charge to throw it back down. The fighting is so close that the emperor's surcoat is slashed in several places. The plates beneath are marked with fresh dents. The defender's exhaustion is plain. Many fight with cracked helmets, broken shields, and weapons notched from repeated blows. A man runs out of arrows and throws stones instead. Another uses the shaft of a shattered spear as a club. The enemy, by contrast, keeps coming in waves, each seemingly as fresh as the last. As the minutes stretch, the emperor knows the larger battle is turning. The loss of Giustiniani's command has thinned the center, and with the Kirkoporta breach in Ottoman hands, the defenders are being attacked from multiple directions. Yet he refuses to abandon his post. There is no talk of retreat, no order to fall back. Accounts later will say He spoke to his remaining guards and companions, telling them there is no escape, that they must fight to the end. Whether those exact words were spoken or not, the men around him fight with the desperate clarity of those who understand this is their final stand. The moment comes when the Ottoman surge is too strong to push back. The Janissaries pour through the breach in greater numbers and the defenders are forced into a fighting withdrawal toward the inner streets. Constantine is last to leave the wall, cutting down one attacker and shoving another aside before following his men down the nearest stairway. But he does not head toward safety. Instead, he joins the fighting in the streets, just inside the breach. Here, narrow alleys and intersections become killing grounds. The emperor wields his sword two-handed now, the shield long since discarded. He fights with a kind of ferocity that is both inspiring and tragic, driving into the thick of the enemy line, cutting left and right. Eyewitnesses say that, at some point, his horse is killed beneath him, and he continues on foot, surrounded by a knot of loyal guards. He fights toward a group of janissaries, pressing into the city. In the chaos, a line between friend and foe blurs. Helmets clash, cloaks tangle, blades flash too fast to follow. And then, suddenly, the emperor is gone. Some say he was struck down by a blow to the head, others that he threw himself into the enemy ranks, preferring death to capture. One account claims he was last seen fighting with bare hands after his sword broke. In the press of bodies, his corpse is never clearly identified. The only certain thing is that Constantine XI, Palaiologos, last emperor of Byzantium, does not leave the field. Word of his disappearance spreads quickly among the defenders. For some, it is a rallying cry, proof that their ruler fought and died with them. For others, it is the final confirmation that the city is lost. The lines begin to break in earnest. Some defenders flee deeper into the city to protect their families. Others make desperate last stands in doorways, at corners, or in front of churches. In the Ottoman ranks, the news sparks a fresh surge. Commanders urge their men forward, telling them the emperor is dead, the city is theirs. The banners advance, drums pounding, and the breaches widen, until there is no longer any clear front line, just scattered pockets of resistance being swallowed by the tide. The emperor's last stand has bought minutes, maybe an hour at most, but it has left its mark. Even among the Ottomans, there is grudging respect for the ruler who fought as a soldier until the very end. Among the survivors, his name becomes the symbol of the city's final day, an image of a leader who chose the breach over the palace, the sword over the throne. Once the emperor's stand at St. Romanus collapses, and the defenders there cut down or scattered, the Ottoman tide surges inward with gathering momentum. The breaches no longer funnel the assault into narrow choke points. Now they open directly into the arteries of the city. The Janissaries and Romelian infantry push forward in disciplined blocks, methodically clearing the streets and pressing toward the city's spiritual and symbolic heart, Hagia Sophia. From the moment the inner wall is lost, civilians in the outer districts begin streaming toward the great church. Some run barefoot, clutching children or small bundles of belongings. Others carry nothing at all, too consumed by panic to think of possessions. The knowledge that the Ottomans have breached the city spreads faster than the attackers themselves. People pour out of side streets and alleys, all moving in the same direction, as if instinctively drawn to the place they believe will be safest. The streets are chaos, and some defenders make last stands to buy time for the civilians to pass. You see militia at an intersection near the Forum of the Ox, dragging overturned carts into place to block the way. They fight until the enemy comes around behind them, then are cut down where they stand. Their sacrifice delays the advance by only minutes, but in a city collapsing by the heartbeat, even minutes matter. The Ottomans advance in waves. The first wave strips the streets of resistance. The second moves in behind, searching buildings and securing intersections. Standard bearers plant banners on rooftops and balconies, marking cleared zones. From the high ground of captured towers, Ottoman archers fire down into any knots of defenders still holding out in the streets below. The soundscape of the city changes as the attackers push deeper. The steady drumbeat that accompanied the siege now mixes with the clamor of street fighting, the crash of doors forced open, the screams of the wounded, the desperate shouts of civilians calling to each other. The scent of gunpowder hangs heavy in the air, mingling with the acrid smoke of burning timber. Hagia Sophia looms above it all, its great dome rising like a calm island in a storm. For centuries, it has been the defining silhouette of Constantinople, visible from miles away across sea and land. Now, as the city falls, it becomes the gathering point for thousands. The wide square before the church fills rapidly, people pressing toward the bronze doors, begging to be let inside. Priests stand at the entrance, trying to maintain some order, blessing those who enter and urging them to stay calm. Inside, the vast space is already crowded. The marble floor disappears under a tide of humanity. Men, women, children, the elderly, the sick, huddled together beneath the soaring vaults. Candles burn in every holder, their flickering light casting the golden mosaics into a warm, unearthly glow. The choir sings hymns continuously, their voices straining to rise above the muffled thunder of fighting outside. Some believe that Hagia Sophia's sanctity will protect them, that the Ottomans will not desecrate such a holy place. Others cling to old prophecies that the city will be saved at the last moment, perhaps by an angelic host descending into the church itself. Parents tell these stories to their children as they wait, their voices tight but gentle, trying to make the fear in the air less sharp. Meanwhile, the Ottoman push toward the church is not a single direct line, but a gradual encirclement. Units fan out through the surrounding streets, cutting off approaches and isolating the defenders still holding out nearby. At the old Augustan Square, a group of Byzantine guards fights a desperate rearguard action, allowing the last columns of civilians to reach the church. When they are finally overwhelmed, the street is littered with their bodies, shields still locked together in the formation they died in. As the Janissaries approach the plaza before Hagia Sophia, they slow their pace, their lines reforming into disciplined ranks. Mehmed has given orders. The church is to be taken intact, not destroyed in the chaos. The soldiers understand the importance of this. Hagia Sophia is not merely a building. It is the crown jewel of the city, and soon it will be the Sultan's own mosque. The first Ottomans to reach the square find it choked with people. They shout for the crowd to move aside. When no one does, they press forward regardless, shoving and striking with the flat of their blades. The front ranks of civilians recoil, trying to push backward, but there is nowhere to go. Panic ripples through the mass, people screaming, clutching each other, trying to protect their children. The great bronze doors of Hagia Sophia are closed now. Inside, priests lead final prayers, their voices echoing beneath the dome. Some of the faithful kneel, others stand rigid, staring at the doors as if by sheer will they can keep them shut. Outside, the pressure builds, Ottoman soldiers hammering on the doors with weapons and the butts of spears, the crowd heaving against itself. When the doors finally give way, they swing inward under the combined force of the attackers and the surging crowd. The Janissaries pour into the narthex, weapons in hand. The singing inside falters for a heartbeat, then stops entirely. The great space fills with the sounds of boots on marble, shouted orders, and the cries of those who realize the sanctuary they sought is no refuge at all. Mehmed's orders to spare the building are followed. There is no burning, no toppling of the great dome, but the people inside are not spared. Some are taken prisoner immediately, herded into groups under guard. Others are cut down in the crush and confusion. The priests are pulled from the altar. The sacred vessels are taken as spoils of war. The choir stalls fall silent, their carved wood soon to be stripped of its Christian symbols. Outside, the Ottoman banners rise over the church's western entrance. The sight is visible across the city, a signal that the spiritual heart of Constantinople is now in the hands of the conquerors. For those still fighting in the southern and western districts, it is a devastating blow to morale. Many lay down their arms upon hearing the news, choosing capture over certain death. Yet, in pockets of the city, resistance continues. Near the seawalls, a group of Venetian sailors barricades a street, firing from windows and rooftops at any Ottomans who venture too close. In the old palace quarter, guards loyal to the memory of Constantine XI's hold a courtyard, refusing surrender until they are surrounded. These skirmishes are brave, but they are isolated, and without coordination they cannot change the outcome. By mid-afternoon, Hagia Sophia has been secured. Mehmed himself will not enter until later, once the city is fully under control. For now, his commanders ensure that the building's doors are guarded and that no further damage is done. The golden mosaics still gleam under the candlelight, though many depict figures whose faces will soon be plastered over in accordance with Islamic tradition. Inside, the captives sit in tight groups on the marble floor, watched by armed guards. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, incense, and fear. Some pray silently. Others stare at nothing, shock hollowing their expressions. Above them, the dome rises in perfect symmetry, unmoved by the events beneath it, a reminder that, while men and empires fall, stone endures. With Hagia Sophia taken, and Ottoman banners flying above its western doors, the rest of the city begins to unravel completely. The defenders who have not already fallen are either overwhelmed in their positions or forced into retreat by advancing enemy columns. By now, the streets are a patchwork of fighting, flight, and surrender. The line between combatant and civilian blurs. Anyone still holding a weapon is treated as a threat, and anyone caught in the wrong place at the wrong time risks the same fate. The Ottomans sweep through in coordinated waves. The first rank clears resistance, the second secures crossroads and gates, and the third follows for the grim business of rounding up captives. Those taken alive are driven into open squares or courtyards, guarded until they can be sent to the Sultan's camp outside the walls. Men of fighting age are separated from women and children. The former are more likely to be killed outright if suspected of being defenders, while the latter are bound for slavery. The slaughter is worst in the districts closest to the main breaches, where the fighting had been thickest. Here, the dead lie where they fell, on the wall walks and the breaches sprawled across stairways and streets. Some have fallen from such heights that their armor is twisted and broken around them. The ground is slick with blood in places, mingled with the splintered remains of weapons and shields. Looting begins almost immediately. Ottoman troops, despite orders to spare key religious sites, take whatever they can carry from homes, shops, and palaces. Doors are smashed open, chests pried apart, and valuables stripped from walls. Silks, gold work, books, and jewelry vanish into the sacks and belts of the conquerors. Furniture is hacked apart for quick access to hidden compartments, and wine cellars are raided, their contents spilled into waiting skins. In the Mise, the main ceremonial avenue of the city, scenes of chaos unfold. Soldiers drive herds of prisoners toward the Golden Gate, their hands bound with rope or strips of cloth torn from their own clothing. Behind them, looters move from one grand house to the next, emerging with whatever treasures they can carry. The marble colonnades that once shaded imperial processions now echo with the tramp of boots and the clatter of armor. Those who try to flee toward the seawalls often find their way blocked. Ottoman patrols sweep the quays, capturing anyone attempting to launch boats into the Golden Horn or the Marmara. Some desperate groups throw themselves into the water, hoping to swim to ships anchored farther out, but most are either drowned in the attempt or shot down by archers from the walls. A few pockets of resistance still hold out near the old Forum of Constantine. A cluster of militia and armed civilians barricades the entrances to a side street, fighting off repeated attempts to dislodge them. They know it is hopeless. The sound of fighting is all around them, but their stand is one of pure defiance. Eventually, the attackers bring up a small cannon and blast through the barricade. The defenders are cut down to a man. Elsewhere, the old Blachine Palace, already damaged in earlier bombardments, becomes the scene of another last stand. Palace guards, joined by servants and residents who refuse to abandon their home, fight room to room as the Ottomans force their way inside. Marble halls echo with the clash of steel and the crash of falling furniture. When it is over, the palace is stripped bare of valuables, its survivors marched out under guard. Throughout the city, civilians cling to the hope that certain buildings, churches, monasteries, hospitals will be spared. Some are Others are stormed by soldiers who see them as repositories of wealth as much as sanctuaries. In several cases, the attackers strip the altars, take icons and relics, and bind the clergy along with the lay people. In the chaos, sacred spaces lose their inviolability. They are simply buildings filled with captives and loot. The slaughter is not indiscriminate, but it is ruthless. The Ottomans aim to kill armed resistance swiftly and to secure the city's population as spoils of war. For many of the captives, the first stop is the open ground outside the St. Romanus Gate, where officers record the numbers and divide them into groups for transport. Some will be sent to serve in Ottoman households, others to distant markets. The air inside the walls is thick with smoke. Fires burn where oil stores have been ignited or where buildings have been set alight during looting. The scent of burning wood mingles with that of scorched grain, and the harsher odor of charred flesh. Sparks drift on the breeze, settling on rooftops and in alleyways. The sun, high now, turns the haze into a yellow pall over the city. In the great square before the hippodrome, Ottoman troops gather to rest and sort their plunder. Some sit on carved marble benches once reserved for senators, drinking from seized goblets. Others try on pieces of armor stripped from fallen defenders, laughing at the ill fit. Horses are led into the arena itself, their hooves clattering on the ancient stone. For the survivors, the surrender is rarely formal. It happens when the soldiers arrive at a door and there is no fight left inside. Families emerge with hands raised, hoping for mercy. Some are spared immediate harm and sent to the growing prisoner columns. Others are cut down without ceremony. The difference often depends on the temperament of the particular squad or the presence of an officer. Amid all this, word begins to spread that Mehmed himself will soon enter the city. Some Ottoman units pause their advance to prepare for the ceremonial moment, planting banners at key points and ensuring the main avenues are clear. Others continue their work, knowing the Sultan will want the city fully subdued before his arrival. By late afternoon, the sound of organized resistance has almost entirely faded. What remains is the sporadic crack of a musket, the clash of a short fight in some side street, or the distant wail of someone discovering their home in ruins. The city's noise has shifted from battle to aftermath. A restless murmur of captives, the shuffle of marching feet, the crash of looted goods being loaded for transport. The streets leading to the St. Romanus Gate are now lined with Ottoman banners. The breaches through which the enemy poured are littered with debris and bodies, the stones scorched and blackened from the bombardment. Where the defenders once stood, Ottoman guards now keep watch, their eyes turned inward toward the conquered city. In the harbor, the Ottoman fleet sits at anchor, its masts a forest of dark lines against the smoky sky. From here, the Sultan will soon have a clear path to enter, not only a captured city, but the seat of an empire that has stood for more than 1,000 years. The slaughter and capture have ensured there will be no uprising when he arrives. The city will greet him in silence, its people subdued by loss and the sheer weight of conquest. By the time the last scattered resistance is stamped out, the city has fallen into an uncanny quiet. Not the peaceful silence of a resting metropolis, but the heavy, breathless hush of a place that has just survived an earthquake and knows more shocks are coming. The main thoroughfares are in Ottoman hands, the gates and breaches guarded, and the banners of the Sultan rise above towers that had flown the double-headed eagle that morning. From the western side, a mounted procession begins. Mehmed II rides at its center, his black horse draped in silks, its hooves muffled against the churned and blood-stained earth of the breach at St. Romanus. The Sultan wears armor rather than ceremonial robes, a concession to the reality that the city is still unsettled. His face is calm, his posture straight, and though he says little, his eyes take in everything. The ruined wall, the collapsed towers, the bodies still lying where they fell. He is 21 years old, and the city before him is the culmination of a lifetime's ambition. The entry is not marked by wild celebration. Ottoman soldiers, disciplined even in victory, line the route to keep order, their weapons ready. Civilians who remain in the streets shrink back against the walls as the column passes. Some bow their heads, others stare openly at the man who has conquered them. Mehmed does not acknowledge the fearful stares. His gaze is fixed on the heart of the city. As he advances, the Sultan passes the minute. Its once proud colonnades scarred and blackened. Shops have been broken open, goods taken or trampled underfoot. The marble pavements are smeared with ash and dust. Here and there, small fires still smolder, casting a greasy smoke that clings to clothing and hair. Thus, he reaches the Augustion. Mehmed dismounts. The great square lies open before him, Hagia Sophia's massive dome dominating the skyline. The plaza is littered with the aftermath of the morning's chaos. Discarded weapons, torn banners, the possessions of those who fled or were captured. The bronze doors of the church stand closed now, guarded by janissaries under strict orders to keep it intact until the Sultan arrives. Mehmed steps forward alone, leaving his escort at a respectful distance. He walks slowly, boots striking the stone with deliberate weight until he stands at the threshold of the building that has been the spiritual and political heart of the Byzantine Empire for nearly 1,000 years. The massive doors swing open at a command, and the cool dimness of the narthex swallows him. Inside, the air is thick with the mingled scents of incense and human sweat. The space is crowded with captives, men, women, and children seated on the marble floor under the watchful eyes of guards. The mosaics glitter faintly in the candlelight, gold and lapis still vibrant, despite the smoke and dust. The Sultan moves toward the center of the nave, his gaze sweeping upward to the dome that seems to float above the vast emptiness. He pauses, taking in the scope and scale of the space. Here, under this roof, emperors have been crowned, treaties signed, patriarchs enthroned. Now it will serve a new ruler, a new faith. Mehmed orders the church cleansed of its Christian symbols in preparation for its transformation into a mosque. The process begins immediately. Icons are covered or removed, crosses taken down. Some of the priests protest, but they are quickly silenced and led away. The Sultan kneels on the marble floor and recites a short prayer in Arabic, dedicating the building to its new purpose. His voice carries through the cavernous interior, echoing against the dome. When he rises, his men begin marking out the areas where rugs will be laid, the mihrab installed, and the minbar placed. Hagia Sophia's long life as a church has ended. Its life as a mosque has begun. From there, Mehmed turns his attention to securing the rest of the city. Orders are issued for key sites to be placed under guard. The palaces, the main gates, the harbors, and the remaining churches deemed structurally sound. Any soldiers found looting in defiance of orders are to be punished. Though in practice, enforcement is uneven. The Sultan's priority is to stabilize control, not to chase down every theft in a city already gutted. In the old imperial palace complex, Mehmed tours the halls where the Byzantine emperors once held court. The mosaics are faded, the furnishing sparse. Much had been removed or sold in the years before the siege, but the bones of grandeur remain. He lingers briefly in the audience chamber, perhaps imagining the weight of the crown he has displaced. Before leaving, he orders the palace sealed for later repair and adaptation to Ottoman use. The administration of the conquered city begins almost immediately. The Sultan appoints governors and commanders to oversee each district, assigning them the dual task of maintaining order and overseeing the redistribution of property. Some of the surviving Byzantine officials are spared and given subordinate roles. Others are taken away, their fates uncertain. In the streets, the transformation is visible within hours. Ottoman banners replace imperial ones. The call to prayer is heard for the first time from temporary wooden platforms erected near the main squares. Market areas are cleared of debris, with stalls reassigned to merchants loyal to the new regime. The harbor is reopened under Ottoman control, guarded by the fleet that now owns the Golden Horn. For the city's surviving population, the change is swift and brutal. Captives are sorted and marched out through the gates in groups. Some are freed by order of the Sultan. Scholars, artisans, and skilled workers he wishes to keep in the city. Others are sent into slavery, their destinations ranging from Anatolia to distant corners of the empire. A portion of the population is allowed to remain, tasked with keeping the essential functions of the city running under Ottoman oversight. Not all changes are violent. Mehmed is careful to present himself not only as a conqueror but as a ruler. Edicts are issued promising protection for certain churches, for merchants who submit to his authority, and for the property of those who accept Ottoman rule. These gestures are as much political calculation as magnanimity. A functioning city is more valuable to him than a corpse of stone and ash. By evening, the Sultan returns to Hagia Sophia for the first formal prayer held within its walls as a mosque. The rugs have been laid, the space cleared of captives, and the mihrab hastily installed in the direction of Mecca. The sound of the muezzin's call fills the dome, its unfamiliar cadence mingling with the centuries-old acoustics of the basilica. For those who remember the morning's liturgy, it is a moment of profound disorientation. For Mehmed and his followers, it is the fulfillment of a long-held vision. Outside, the city is under curfew. Fires are extinguished or left to burn in isolated ruins. Patrols move along the streets, enforcing order and deterring further resistance. In the quieter quarters, families huddle in whatever shelter they still have, listening to the distant sounds of the new regime settling in. The conquest is complete, but the transformation has only begun. Within weeks, artisans will begin work on converting other major churches into mosques. The walls will be repaired under Ottoman supervision. Their scars a reminder of the siege and a warning to any who might think to challenge the city's new masters. The name Istanbul will not be official for some time, but already, in the mouths of soldiers and administrators, Constantinople is becoming something else, an Ottoman capital. For now, though, Mehmed walks through his new possession in the fading light. He pauses at the breaches, at the gates, at the squares where the fiercest fighting took place. He has taken a city that resisted every enemy for 1,000 years. And as the sun sets over the Golden Horn, the young sultan knows that his name will be bound to this day for as long as the stones of the walls stand. News of the city's fall spreads faster than ships can sail. Even before Mehmed's scribes finish drafting formal announcements, word carries outward with the fleeing survivors, captured merchants, and foreign sailors who had been trapped inside the walls. By the time the first Ottoman messengers reach Edirne, reports are already crossing the Aegean and the Balkans. Constantinople has fallen. The last great bastion of the Eastern Roman Empire is gone. In the courts of Europe, the reactions are a mixture of disbelief, grief, and dawning fear. Venice and Genoa, both with deep commercial ties to the city, receive the news with a sense of immediate loss. Their trading colonies along the Black Sea and in the eastern Mediterranean are suddenly vulnerable, their routes to the riches of Asia now in Ottoman hands. In Venice, merchants gather in the Piazza San Marco, calculating losses even as the Senate debates how to respond. Some urge immediate naval action, others caution that the Republic is already stretched by its wars in Italy. In Rome, Pope Nicholas V mourns openly. The fall of the city is a spiritual and symbolic wound. A Christian capital, once the seat of emperors, now in Muslim hands. The Pope calls for a new crusade, issuing letters to the rulers of Europe, urging them to set aside their rivalries in the face of this common threat. Yet the responses are tepid. The 100 Years' War has only just ended, and the kingdoms of France and England are exhausted. In Germany, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III issues proclamations of solidarity but offers no armies. In Hungary, the news is received with alarm. King Ladislas and his advisors know that with Constantinople gone, the Ottoman frontier is that much closer to their own. Border fortresses are strengthened, levies are raised, and the Danube is prepared as a defensive line. In Poland and Lithuania, the thought of Ottoman influence reaching into the Black Sea stirs unease, though the immediate focus remains on their own eastern conflicts. In the Islamic world, the reaction is triumph. In Cairo, the Mamluk Sultanate greets the news with formal congratulations to Mehmed, acknowledging the military brilliance of his victory. In Persia, the rulers of the Timurids take note, aware that the Ottomans now command one of the greatest cities in the world. Across Anatolia, imams give sermons praising the conquest as a sign of divine favor. The shift in trade is immediate and profound. For centuries, Constantinople had been a key link between Europe and Asia, its markets a place where goods from the Silk Road flowed into the Mediterranean. With the city in Ottoman hands, customs duties and trade regulations change overnight. Venetian and Genoese merchants still present in the city are faced with new taxes and stricter controls. The Sultan, recognizing the value of commerce, does not seek to destroy it, but to redirect it to Ottoman advantage. Overland routes into Europe now pass firmly through Ottoman territory, giving Mehmed leverage over prices and access. The fall also drives renewed interest in finding alternate routes to Asia westward by sea. In Portugal, explorers already probing down the coast of Africa find their efforts given fresh urgency. In time, this shift in focus will help set the stage for the voyages of Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and others. But, for now, it is an undercurrent, not yet a tide. Militarily, the conquest is a shock to the European balance of power. The Byzantines had been weak for centuries, but their city's walls had been a physical and psychological barrier to Ottoman expansion. With that barrier gone, nothing obvious stands between Mehmed and further incursions into the Balkans. In the months after the fall, Ottoman raiding parties pushed deeper into Serbia and Bosnia, testing defenses and gathering supplies. In Orthodox lands, the news cuts particularly deep. Russia, far to the north, begins to see itself as the new guardian of Orthodox Christianity, the mantle of Third Rome quietly forming in the minds of church leaders in Moscow. The Patriarchate of Constantinople is not destroyed, but it is now under Ottoman control, its leader chosen with the Sultan's approval. This arrangement will have far-reaching consequences for the relationship between Orthodox communities and the Ottoman state. Culturally, the impact is no less profound. Greek scholars, already leaving the city in the years before the siege, now depart in larger numbers, taking manuscripts and knowledge with them to Italy and beyond. This exodus feeds the Renaissance, as works of ancient philosophy, science, and literature find new audiences in the West. Mehmed, however, also keeps many scholars in the city, integrating their skills into his administration. He is not a destroyer of learning. He sees value in knowledge as a tool of governance and prestige. The fall sends ripples even into the far corners of Christendom. In the small kingdoms of Scandinavia, the news is distant yet troubling, proof that Islam's reach is growing in the heart of Europe's southern flank. In the Iberian Peninsula, where Castile and Aragon are still engaged in the Reconquista, it is both a warning and an encouragement. If the Ottomans can take Constantinople, then the reconquest of Granada may be equally achievable for Christian arms. Mehmed's image, too, begins to spread. To the Ottomans, he is Fatih, the conqueror, embodying the fulfillment of a prophecy centuries old. To his enemies, he is a formidable, even terrifying figure, a ruler who blends youthful ambition with relentless military discipline. Embassies from both friend and foe will soon make their way to his court, seeking either alliance or at least a measure of security against his expanding power. In the immediate months after the fall, Constantinople undergoes visible transformation. The Sultan orders sections of the walls repaired, both to display Ottoman might and to ensure the city remains defensible under its new rulers. He initiates the construction of new markets, caravanserais, and public baths, reshaping the city's economy to serve as a hub for his empire. The population changes as well. Thousands of Muslims from across the empire are encouraged to settle in the city, filling the gaps left by those who fled or were enslaved. Communities of Christians and Jews remain, their status regulated under Ottoman law, as dhimmi protected, but taxed and restricted. Over time, this mix will give the city a new cultural character, blending Byzantine heritage with Ottoman governance. For Europe, the psychological blow is harder to mend than the practical losses. Constantinople had been a symbol, the last remnant of the Roman Empire, a Christian stronghold at the meeting point of continents. Its fall is a reminder that no city is impregnable, no empire eternal. In the decades to come, poets will mourn it, preachers will invoke it as a call to unity, and historians will mark it as the end of the Middle Ages. For the Ottoman Empire, it is a beginning. Mehmed moves his capital from Edirne to Constantinople, cementing its status as the heart of his realm. From here, he will direct campaigns deeper into Europe and across the eastern Mediterranean. The city's strategic position gives him control of both land and sea routes, a power that will shape the politics of two continents. In the marketplaces of Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad, traders begin speaking of Constantinople not as the city that was, but as the city that is an Ottoman prize that connects east and west under a single authority. The name itself starts to shift in usage. While Constantini remains official, Istanbul becomes common in daily speech among Turks and Greeks alike, echoing the Greek phrase eis tin polin, into the city. The fall of Constantinople is thus not only the end of a chapter in history, but the start of another, one whose influence will reach far beyond the battered stones of its walls. Its impact will be felt in the strategies of kings, the sermons of priests, the dreams of explorers, and the ambitions of conquerors. In that sense, the city has not truly fallen. It has transformed, its identity remade, to serve a new master and a new age. In the weeks after the fall, Constantinople settles into a strange rhythm, half wind-licking, half reinvention. The sharpest sounds of conquest fade, replaced by the slower, methodical noises of rebuilding. The ring of chisels on stone as wall breaches are repaired, the creak of carts bringing in timber, the calls of merchants testing the reopened markets. But beneath the surface of work and order lies a quiet awareness that the city's identity is shifted forever. For those who survived the siege, each day begins with the reminder of absence. Streets once bustling with familiar neighbors now have gaps, empty doorways where families were taken as captives, shops boarded up or given to new owners. Churches that stood for centuries under the Byzantine cross now bear Ottoman banners, their bells silent, replaced by the rhythmic call to prayer from hastily constructed minarets. Some residents bow to the changes, learning the new order's rules. Others cling to old habits, whispering their grievances in private. Mehmed wastes no time in securing his prize as both fortress and symbol. He orders the rapid restoration of the Theodosian walls, their shattered towers rebuilt with fresh stone. He has the breaches filled and reinforced, not to keep out Christians. He knows the West is too fractured to mount an immediate counterattack, but to make clear that no enemy, Ottoman or otherwise, will take the city from him. The work becomes part of his image, the conqueror who not only seizes, but also protects. Inside the walls, he oversees a carefully calculated repopulation. Entire families are brought in from Anatolia, the Balkans, and other parts of the empire, given houses abandoned during the siege. Skilled artisans from Bursa, Damascus, and even as far as Cairo are invited to set up their trades here. The Sultan knows a capital must live to command respect, and to live it must be filled with people who have a stake in its prosperity. The transformation is architectural as well as demographic. Hagia Sophia is not the only church converted to a mosque. Other grand basilicas follow, their interiors adapted for Islamic worship, while their fundamental structures are preserved. Mehmed's reasoning is pragmatic. The grandeur of these buildings projects Ottoman power as much as their original Christian purpose once projected Byzantine might. At the same time, he authorizes the building of new mosques in Ottoman style, blending domes and minarets into the cityscape in a way that will, in time, feel as if it had always been so. Markets that had been shuttered reopen under new regulation. The Sultan reorganizes the commercial districts, creating zones for specific goods, textiles, spices, ceramics, precious metals. Caravan routes are adjusted to feed directly into the city, ensuring a steady flow of goods. Taxes are imposed but carefully. Mehmed wants Constantinople to thrive as an economic hub, not suffocate under its own tariffs. For the surviving Greeks, Armenians and Jews of the city, life takes on the structured shape of demi-status. They are permitted to keep their faiths, but they must pay the jizya tax and accept certain limitations in public life. The Patriarchate of Constantinople is reinstated under Ottoman oversight, its leader chosen with the Sultan's approval, a move that both asserts control and placates the Orthodox population by preserving its religious hierarchy. Beyond the city's boundaries, the world continues to react. In Europe, the shock lingers, sharpened by a sense of helplessness. Plans for a crusade are discussed in the halls of Venice, Rome, and Buda, but alliances crumble under the weight of politics and mutual suspicion. For Mehmed, this paralysis is a gift, time to consolidate his hold on the Bosporus and strengthen the Ottoman fleet that now controls passage between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Trade, however, does not pause. Venetian and Genoese merchants, though now operating under heavier taxation, continue to fill the city's docks with ships. Their goods are still in demand, and Mehmed, despite the rhetoric of holy war, knows commerce is the lifeblood of empires. The harbors hum with the familiar sounds of barrels rolling, crates stacking, and rigging creaking in the wind. The Sultan also turns his attention to the symbolic center of imperial power. He begins work on the Old Palace, soon to be replaced by the far grander Topkapi, fitting it with audience chambers, private quarters, and gardens. This palace will be the place where ambassadors from Europe, Arabia, and Asia will come to bow, bargain, and be impressed. His court takes on the cosmopolitan flavor of the city itself. Greek scribes, Persian poets, Arab theologians, and Turkish generals all walk its halls. As summer turns to autumn, Constantinople begins to look less like a conquered city and more like a capital remade. The rubble from the siege is cleared, though here and there a blackened wall or collapsed roof remains as a mute reminder. New fountains are built, streets are repaved, and the hum of daily life replaces the drumbeat of war. Yet for those who lived through the siege, the memory of that drumbeat lingers, a sound that can still quicken the heart in fear. Outside the city, the wider currents of history shift. The fall of Constantinople becomes a fixed point in European consciousness, a marker of the end of the medieval order. Chroniclers write of it as the close of one age and the shadowed opening of another. In monasteries and universities, scholars debate whether the loss will hasten the apocalypse or simply usher in a new political reality. In the Islamic world, the conquest is celebrated in poetry, song, and inscription. Mosques in Anatolia and the Balkans add prayers for the Sultan's long life, naming him conqueror of the city of Caesar. Coins are minted bearing his titles, circulating the news of his triumph to every corner of the empire. In the years to come, the city's role will only grow as Ottoman campaigns push deeper into Europe and across the eastern Mediterranean. Constantinople will serve as the supply heart, the staging ground, the place where military triumphs are paraded and political alliances are forged. It will also remain a place where cultures meet, sometimes in harmony, often in friction, shaping an identity that is neither wholly Byzantine nor wholly Ottoman, but something in between. For the last Byzantines who remain, the transformation is bittersweet. They walk streets they have known since childhood, now patrolled by foreign soldiers. They pray in churches now, stripped of their mosaics, or turned to other uses. They trade in markets where the language has shifted, the currency changed, yet they also see the city breathing again, no longer on the brink of starvation or ruin. The irony is hard to ignore. The conqueror who took their freedom has also revived their home. As for Mehmed, he moves forward with the assuredness of a man who believes his destiny has been confirmed. The conquest of Constantinople is not the end goal, but the beginning of a larger imperial vision. He speaks openly of Rome itself, of pushing the empire's reach as far as the legions once marched. His court listens, some with awe, others with the private understanding that such ambitions will bring more wars. And so the city that began the year under siege ends it under new banners, its streets filled with new voices, its skyline altered by the first rising minarets. The trauma of the siege will fade in time, replaced by the routines of life under the Ottomans. Children will grow up knowing no other rulers, merchants will adapt to the new order, and travelers will arrive to find a city alive, its wounds hidden beneath the veneer of prosperity. History will mark the fall of Constantinople as the end of the Byzantine Empire, but for those still walking its streets, life simply bends to the new shape of things. The stones of the Theodosian walls stand again, patched and strong. Hagia Sophia's dome, still catches the sun. And at dusk, as the call to prayer drifts over the Golden Horn, the city, whether called Constantinople, Constantinia, or Istanbul, reminds the world that it is still, in its own way, eternal. Sweet dreams.